Welcome to From the Mind of Christine McConnell. So obviously it's December and Christmas has exploded all over my counter. I'm so excited for this particular episode because I have been sort of tackling like huge projects every month, and I wanted to do something a little bit more simple because this is a month that we're like shipping things out and trying to do a million different things. So I figured I would tackle these really fun spider ornaments. I made these about 2 years ago, but I've never actually shown people how to make them. They're really simple, and if you're running low on funds this Christmas and you're trying to think up interesting gifts to give people, the components of this spider are not terribly expensive, and you can personalize them and sign them and give them away as presents, and people will love them. So with that said, let's begin, and I think this is going to be a super fun episode. Okay, so I'm gonna be making 2 spiders today. One, this really kind of dark sagey green, and one, this really beautiful crimson red. I was able to find a polymer clay that matched that bulb, but for these ones, I'm gonna have to actually mix 2 colors to get the right shade. As soon as I have that, then I can start building a skeleton out of wire. So my spiders are going to have a total of 8 legs. Typically when I make a tarantula, I do 2 extra little feelers in the front, which kind of equals a total of 10 legs. But on these particular ornaments, I've personally found that 8 seems to be just the right number, that when you're standing back and looking at it, it does read as a spider. Every time you finish a leg and you make the cut, whatever tip remains on the spool of wire is going to be your next foot of the next leg. So just insert that into a crevice you can find in the center of this bundle of wires. Give yourself the length of a single leg and start twisting around that base, and that will lock that leg in and make making the next leg much easier. Once you have all of your legs in place, then just go through it and find the shortest leg and clip down all of the others just to match that one. All right, so now we've got our base skeleton, and now we just need to shape it. My legs are about 5 inches long, and that's sort of proportionate to the size of this ball. It really doesn't have to be terribly precise, but just so long as you have a little bit of a nugget sticking up in sort of the butt area, just because we're going to be putting some clay on that and using that to sort of affix to the bulb. So you want to make sure you have that. Now for this bulb, it's obviously a larger bulb, so my legs are probably going to be, I think, about 6 or 7 inches long on this one. And I will start that as soon as I am finished shaping this into the shape of a spider. Because I'm only making 2 spiders today, I'm going to be posing them in my favorite spider pose, which is an attack pose. But the 2 years before that I made these spiders, I was making a whole bunch of them, and it really told a better story to do them in a variety of poses. So if you are doing one-offs for gifts, I would say the attack pose is the most flattering or the most interesting. But if you're making a bunch of these for your tree, then I would say mixing it up is a good idea. To give myself just a little bit of additional insurance that these legs aren't going to go anywhere, I'm going to take a thinner wire and wrap it around the base a bunch of times. just to make sure everything stays in place. Now that I've got that done, it's time to start on my second larger spider. I ended up making these legs about 6.5 inches long, and I found that wrapping that thinner wire around the base before shaping the legs was a lot more efficient, so I would try that. I painted my fingernails just before we started filming today, and if you compare what they looked like at the beginning of this episode to what they look like by the end of the episode, it's pretty funny. All right, so now that we have our skeletons looking amazing, it's time to heat up your oven to 275 and get your polymer clay into sort of fighting shape. It's gonna, if it's room temperature, if it's cold or chilly, it's gonna be really hard, but once you heat it up in your hands, it becomes really pliable. Most figurines are actually built this way, where you have a wire armature and then you build the clay on top of it. So this really is probably the lengthiest part of this process, so it's going to take the most time. So you kind of just get to relax and fiddle and fiddle and then fiddle some more. We're ultimately going to be covering the surface with glitter, so you don't have to get it perfectly smooth. This is now going to go into the oven for about 15 minutes, and while we wait, I figure I could show you a few of the Christmas decorations I've put up. And don't be fooled by that adorable little face. I'm pretty sure he just wants to watch the world burn. And now it's time to start applying the green clay. So lately I've been doing kind of a Ted Bundy marathon on Audible, which, I mean, I don't know, what says Christmas more than Ted Bundy? But That being said, I feel like there's 3 audiobooks that I've read that have all kind of given a different perspective on this one awful individual. And I don't know, I feel like until I read all 3, I didn't really have a full perspective. So the 3 books that I read that I really enjoyed, or at least thought was interesting, was The Ted Bundy Murders by Kevin Sullivan. It's pretty gritty and goes into pretty lurid details. The second is The Phantom Prince by Elizabeth and Molly Kendall. That was a really, really interesting book. You have moments where you're sympathizing with Elizabeth Kendall and other moments where you don't really understand her logic. And this is the girlfriend of Ted Bundy. Her daughter, however, Molly Kendall, gives a lot of interesting perspective, and I just sympathize with her quite a bit. The last one is The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. Now, this is a true crime classic that I've actually listened to before, but after listening to those 2 previous books that I told you about, it kind of gave you, listening to it again, really kind of gave you an interesting perspective on where Anne Rule fit into all of this. And I just personally thought it was super fascinating. Okay, so I've got the last green one in the oven, and now it's time to start adding some glitter. This is such an incredibly fun part of this project, but it's super messy, so I like to just have a little bit of aluminum foil underneath me, because as I do this, it's just going to be going all over the place, and at the end, you can just crinkle this up and pour any that you didn't use back into your container. So I'm using Mod Podge to paint a thin coat over this entire spider, and then I'm just going to be sprinkling over this ruby red glitter. Okay, at this point, I think I'm just playing with the glitter. The craft stores I went to stock up on this project did not have this dark sagey green color in glitter. So what I'm going to be doing is mixing a black, a green, and then even adding in a little bit of a copper, because if you look at the ball itself, it has a bit of a copper undertone to it. All right, so I'm done with the amazingly fun glitter part, which, by the way, I'm gonna be finding glitter in this kitchen for probably the next 10 years, but I don't know, I think glitter's pretty, so it doesn't bother me. Now we are ready to tackle pretty much one of the last steps of this project, which is going to be painting some patterns onto our ornaments. I'm doing a spider pattern. This is kind of something you almost can't mess up. If you just Google some pictures of the backs of a spider, they look kind of wonky and strange. So I'm using a couple coils of the wire that I use to actually make the skeleton to hold the balls in place. And I'm going to be using a little bit of gold paint with a fine point brush. And let's just get going on this. I'm attaching some Swarovski crystals using a little bit of Mod Podge and then applying them to my spiders. You don't have to do this step. I didn't do this step 2 years ago, and it does increase the cost of the project, but it also kind of increases how sort of magical they are. And speaking of magical, can we just take a moment to appreciate what my fingernails look like now? I'm finished. I can't believe how magical these come out considering how little time it takes to make them. I'm still going to apply a little bit of fishing line, like a loop underneath using a hot glue gun. That way I can just hang them on a tree or on a wreath or something around the house. They're really just unbelievably special looking and really spooky too, which is pretty much all I like. So I'm very excited to enjoy our first white Christmas here in New York State. It should be really, really fun. I'll make sure I post a few things about that. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves. Have a very Merry Christmas, and I will see you all very soon.